The billionaire's voice sliced through the crowd like a blade. "I'll give you the Ferrari, if you can make it run." His tone dripped with arrogance, his laughter echoing across the marble courtyard. But the woman he mocked didn't flinch. She simply stepped forward, wiping her hands on an old rag, her dark eyes calm but unbreakable. Carson Hale, a man worth billions, loved two things: power and attention. That afternoon at his mansion was supposed to be just another show of his wealth. The centerpiece of his display sat in the driveway under the sunlight. A blue Ferrari, its hood open, the engine lifeless. Cameras clicked, glasses clinked, and his guests waited for another moment of arrogance disguised as charm. "It's dead," one of his engineers muttered, embarrassed. Carson smirked. "Then find someone who can bring it back to life." "Actually," he turned toward the crowd, eyes sparkling with mischief, "let's make it fun." He spotted her then. A woman standing near the edge of the driveway. Jeans faded, shirt smudged with grease, hair pulled back carelessly. She didn't fit in with the people dressed in designer suits and glittering jewelry. That alone made her stand out. "You there," Carson said, pointing straight at her. "You even know what a Ferrari is?" The woman didn't flinch. Her voice was steady, bold, and clear. "An engine doesn't care who owns it," she said. "If it's broken, I can fix it." The crowd laughed instantly, sharp, cruel laughter. But she didn't blink. There was something unshakable about her stillness. Carson smirked, loving the attention. "Tell you what," he said, holding up his keys like a prize. "If you can make this car run, I'll give it to you. This blue Ferrari yours." Gasps rippled through the audience. Some thought it was a joke, others recorded with their phones, eager to see the humiliation unfold. To them, it was just another show, a rich man playing with someone he thought was beneath him. But Tiana Brooks didn't hear their laughter. She only heard the silence inside herself, that deep, steady voice that said, "Prove them wrong." She walked forward, slow and calm, her boots clicking against the marble. The crowd's mockery faded into whispers as she reached the car. She popped the hood and leaned in. The smell of fuel hit her immediately. Something was off. She looked closer and realized what Carson had done. The wires were switched, the plugs wrong, the belt loosened. This wasn't just a malfunction. It was deliberate sabotage. Carson crossed his arms, watching her with amusement. "Need a hand, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice heavy with mockery. She didn't even glance at him. "No," she said. "I just need space." Her words silenced a few chuckles. She grabbed a small toolkit from her truck parked outside the gate. Worn-out tools she'd used for years in her tiny garage down the hill. The same tools that had helped her fix hundreds of cars no one else could save. The people around her didn't know her story. They didn't know she once worked at a luxury car company, until she was replaced by someone better suited for the brand. They didn't know she spent her nights rebuilding engines that others threw away, finding beauty in what the world called worthless. Now she stood before the billionaire's challenge, hands steady, mind focused. The crowd whispered and laughed again, but her father's voice echoed in her heart. "Machines don't lie, Tiana. They break, but they tell you why. Listen close, and you'll fix what no one else can." She listened. The faintest sound in the pistons, the smell of oil, the tension in the wiring, all of it spoke to her. She moved fast but with precision, her fingers tightening bolts, adjusting coils, cleaning the clogged injectors. Sweat trickled down her forehead, but she didn't stop. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sunlight faded to gold. The laughter had quieted now, replaced by murmurs of curiosity. Even Carson, sipping his drink, was frowning slightly. He hadn't expected her to last this long. Finally, she straightened, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. The Ferrari looked the same, but something had changed, an invisible rhythm, a heartbeat she had restored. She slid into the driver's seat. The crowd leaned forward. Carson smirked again, trying to reclaim control. "Go ahead," he said. "Let's hear the miracle." Tiana turned the key. For a brief moment, silence. Then, a sputter. Another. And suddenly, the blue Ferrari roared to life, shaking the air around them. The engine's deep growl filled the courtyard. It was smooth, alive, perfect. Gasps erupted. People clapped. Phones captured every second. Even those who had mocked her now stood frozen in disbelief. Carson's grin vanished. His champagne glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the tiles. He stared at the car, the one his own team couldn't fix. now running flawlessly under the touch of the woman he tried to humiliate. Tiana stepped out calmly, her face unreadable. "Looks like it runs just fine," she said softly. Carson tried to speak, but stumbled. You, you must have. That's impossible." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Nothing's impossible," she said. "You just have to respect what you're working with." Her words landed heavy, cutting through the pride in his chest. The crowd erupted in cheers, some shouting her name, others recording her with admiration. Carson forced a smile, pretending not to care. "A deal's a deal," he said tightly. "You made it run. It's yours." She paused, looking at the shining blue car. For a second, she imagined what her father would have said, proud, smiling, telling her she'd done enough. Then she turned back to Carson. "I don't need your Ferrari," she said softly. "I just needed you to see the difference between value and worth." With that, she turned and began walking away. The crowd parted as she passed, silent now, respectful. The blue Ferrari purred behind her like a victory drum, echoing her strength. Carson stood motionless, the weight of her words hanging in the air. But what he didn't know, what no one there knew, was that this woman he mocked had just stepped back into his life for a reason he could never imagine. Their stories weren't strangers. They were about to collide again, in ways that would change everything. That night, Carson Hale couldn't sleep. The sound of that blue Ferrari still echoed in his head, that smooth, confident roar that mocked his arrogance. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Calm, fearless, untouchable. He sat in his dim study, glass of whiskey in hand, the city lights shining through the window. On the table lay his phone, replaying the viral clip over and over again. Billionaire humiliates mechanic, gets humbled instead. The internet had done what it always did. The moment had exploded. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Some laughed at him, others praised her. "She's a queen. That woman just destroyed his ego with an engine. Money doesn't buy talent, respect does." Carson slammed the phone down. For the first time in years, he felt small. His reputation, built on control, charm, and calculated moves, was slipping. But deep beneath his anger, another feeling stirred, something he hadn't felt in decades. Guilt. Because as much as he wanted to deny it, there was something hauntingly familiar about her. Her voice, the way she moved around that engine, even the stubborn tilt of her head, it all reminded him of someone he used to know. He pulled open a drawer and took out an old photograph, a picture of a small garage on the edge of his hometown. Standing in front of it was a man with oil-stained hands, grinning proudly, with a little girl sitting on his shoulders. Her smile was the same. Her eyes, those sharp, determined eyes, were the same. "Tiana Brooks," he whispered. No way. Back then, before the mansions, before the fame, Carson wasn't the man everyone feared. He was just a struggling dreamer fixing cars in that same garage. And that man in the photo, Frank Brooks, had been his mentor. The man who taught him everything he knew about engines, about patience, about honesty. Until the day Carson betrayed him. Years ago, a young Carson had stolen Frank's designs for a revolutionary car part, the one that later became the foundation of his billion-dollar empire. Frank had confronted him. They argued. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Then came the fire, the night that destroyed the garage, ended Frank's business, and drove him into bankruptcy. Carson left the town the next morning and never looked back. Until now. And now, standing before him again, was Frank's daughter, grown, fearless, and unknowingly holding the power to break everything he'd built. He stared at the picture for a long time, the weight of his past pressing down on his chest. Finally, he muttered, "She doesn't know. She can't know." But Tiana did know. She hadn't said a word that day, but when Carson called her sweetheart and mocked her like trash, she recognized his voice immediately. You don't forget the sound of the man who destroyed your father's life. You don't forget the man who took everything from your family and left you to rebuild from ashes. She just didn't expect him to remember her. That night, as she sat in her small rented room above the garage, her phone buzzed nonstop with messages, interviews, sponsorship offers. Everyone suddenly wanted the woman who humbled a billionaire. But she wasn't thinking about fame. She was thinking about justice. Her father had passed 5 years earlier. Heart failure, they said. But she knew what really killed him: disappointment. Watching the man he trusted become the face of the company that should have been his. Tiana leaned back in her chair, eyes burning with quiet resolve. "You took my father's dream," she whispered. "Now, I'll take your piece." Meanwhile, Carson couldn't get her out of his head. The next morning, he arrived at his corporate tower downtown, but his mind wasn't on business. He called his assistant, Maria. "Find everything you can on a woman named Tiana Brooks," he ordered. Mechanic, mid-30s, lives near Ridgeview. Maria hesitated. "Sir, that's the woman from the video." "I know," he said sharply. "Just do it." By noon, the file was on his desk. Her life, her records, her history. He scanned the pages. Single mother, small-town mechanic, no criminal record, former employee of Hale Motors for 3 years before being downsized. His stomach turned when he saw the date. She'd been fired the same month his company merged with one of his biggest competitors. He hadn't even known her name back then, but someone under his leadership had thrown her out like she didn't matter. He closed the folder, his mind spinning. For the first time in decades, Carson Hale, the man who owned everything, realized he'd lost something far more valuable than a car or reputation. He'd lost his humanity, and somehow, the woman he humiliated was forcing him to see it. 2 days later, he drove down to the same small garage she worked in. No camera crews, no bodyguards. Just him and the guilt that refused to leave. The building was small, old bricks, peeling paint, the faint smell of gasoline and coffee drifting from inside. She was there, head under the hood of an old pickup, music playing softly in the background. When she heard footsteps, she didn't even look up. "I told you the blue Ferrari doesn't need another tune-up," she said coldly. "It's fine." Carson froze. "You knew I'd come." "I knew men like you always do," she replied. "You can't stand being wrong." He took a deep breath. "You're right. I was wrong. About you. About everything." She pulled herself up, eyes sharp. "You don't get to say that, Carson. Not after what you did." He blinked. "What I did? You really don't remember?" she asked bitterly. "You took my father's design. You built your empire on his work. And when he tried to fight back, your people ruined him." The silence hit like thunder. Carson's face went pale. "Frank Brooks, your father," his voice trailed off. He took a step back, the air leaving his chest. "Tiana, I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "You knew enough to forget us," she said. "You knew enough to take everything that wasn't yours." He stood there, speechless, the billionaire who could buy anything, suddenly stripped of words, of pride, of defense. Tiana turned away, tears burning behind her eyes, but her voice stayed strong. "You wanted me to prove myself? I did. Now it's your turn to fix what you broke." And before he could answer, she walked back to the car, leaving him standing there in the garage, surrounded by ghosts of the past. Carson Hale couldn't move. The garage smelled of oil and gasoline, but it also smelled of memory, of a life he had buried deep beneath mansions, boardrooms, and money. Every corner of that small building reminded him of the man he had once been, the man who had made promises and broken them, the man who had taken Frank Brooks' dream and turned it into his empire. Tiana wiped her hands on a rag and glanced at him. "You're staring," she said flatly. "Do you plan to apologize all day, or are you going to do something about it?" Carson swallowed hard. He had been through every high-stakes negotiation, every business battle imaginable. Yet standing here, with her calm eyes boring into his, he felt powerless. For the first time in his life, money couldn't fix anything. Influence couldn't repair the past. Even his blue Ferrari, the symbol of his arrogance, was nothing compared to the wreckage he had caused. I want to make it right," he said finally, his voice low. "I don't know how, but I want to try." Tiana turned, her face unreadable. "You should have thought about that 20 years ago." Her words hit him harder than any insult ever could. "My father believed in fairness. You destroyed his life. You destroyed mine. You think one apology fixes that?" "I know it doesn't," Carson admitted. "But I can't change the past. I can only try to fix the present. Let me help you. Whatever you need, I'll provide it. Money, resources, anything." She studied him for a long moment. The billionaire who humiliated her, the man who unintentionally shattered her family, now standing vulnerable in front of her, offered everything he had. But her pride wasn't something money could buy. Her father had taught her to fight for respect, not rewards. To rebuild, not beg. "You think your money erases what you've done?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "It doesn't. Not for me. Not for my father. Not for anyone who had to pay for your ambition." Carson felt his chest tighten. For once, he couldn't argue, couldn't lecture, couldn't manipulate. Her words were truth, sharp and undeniable. He had a choice: fight or listen. I'll listen, he said finally. Tell me what I can do to help. Her eyes softened ever so slightly, but only for a moment. You start by being honest, she said. No excuses, no arrogance, just truth. And you do it publicly. My father's name deserves that much. And you need to see the people you hurt. He nodded slowly. This was unfamiliar territory. Carson had built his life around secrecy, around controlling perception. Yet here, in a small garage smelling of oil and faded dreams, he realized that transparency was the only way forward. Over the next few days, Carson threw himself into action. He arranged a public statement, detailing the history of Hale Motors and acknowledging the contributions of Frank Brooks. The media jumped immediately: scandal, betrayal, redemption. The headlines were explosive: Billionaire admits past wrongdoing, honors late mechanic's legacy. Tiana watched the press conference from her garage, leaning against the workbench. Her arms crossed, lips pressed tight. She didn't want to be impressed, but part of her couldn't deny the ripple effect. Her father's name was finally being cleared. Carson, meanwhile, wasn't just making a statement. He was learning, painfully and publicly, how to be accountable. He visited people who had worked with Frank, offering recognition and support. He started funding educational programs for mechanics in underprivileged areas, ensuring that no young talent would ever be overlooked like her father had been. Despite all of this, Tiana wasn't ready to forgive. She knew better than anyone that the past couldn't be erased with money or charity. She still felt the sting of betrayal, the weight of lost years, the nights she had worked alone in silence, rebuilding engines and dreams that were never hers to claim. Yet, she also noticed subtle changes in Carson. He no longer spoke to her with condescension. He no longer tried to control the narrative. His arrogance, that shield of wealth, had cracked, revealing a man grappling with guilt and understanding for the first time in decades. One evening, Carson returned to the garage with a box, not a gift, not a bribe, but a gesture. Inside were tools, custom-made, top quality, designed to help her expand her work. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly. I just want to make sure your work is respected. Your father's work is respected. That's all I can do right now. Tiana opened the box, examining the tools. They were perfect. She felt the weight of his effort, the sincerity behind the gesture. But she shook her head. This doesn't fix the past, she said. It helps the future. That's all it does. And the future is mine to shape. Carson nodded. He understood. And that night, as he drove home in silence, he realized something else. The hum of the blue Ferrari she had fixed wasn't just a sound of an engine running. It was a reminder that real strength, real talent, and real courage weren't bought. They were earned. And sometimes, they came from those you least expected. Tiana went back to work the next morning, her mind focused on engines and life, her heart heavy but determined. She knew Carson's efforts were just the beginning. She also knew that, sooner or later, their paths would cross again, not as billionaire and mechanic, not as victim and offender, but as two people connected by a past that refused to stay buried. And deep down, she sensed the storm was coming. A storm that would force Carson to face more than just his mistakes. A storm that would test both of them in ways neither could predict. Because sometimes, the people you try to humiliate are the ones with the power to change everything. Weeks passed, and Tiana's reputation soared. The story of her fixing the blue Ferrari went viral, drawing attention from car enthusiasts, sponsors, and media outlets. She had refused interviews at first, not interested in fame. But slowly, she realized the platform could serve a purpose, honoring her father's legacy and teaching others that talent couldn't be bought. Carson, on the other hand, felt the pressure mounting. His efforts to make amends were ongoing, but the media scrutiny and public attention had become relentless. Every headline reminded him of the shame he had endured at the garage. Every viral clip reminded him of the woman who had exposed the arrogance he had built his life upon. One morning, Carson received a call that made his heart skip. Tiana Brooks just accepted a challenge, said Maria, his assistant, her voice sharp with urgency. A high-profile international car show. She's going to compete, alone, against some of the best engineers in the world. Carson's stomach tightened. The show wasn't just about engines. It was a stage, a proving ground, and the press would swarm. Where? He asked, trying to hide the sudden edge of panic. Geneva, Maria replied. She's leaving next week. Carson leaned back, stunned. He knew that this was more than a competition, it was a message. Tiana wasn't just proving her skill. She was proving that she could rise above him, above his empire, above every expectation he thought he had set. Meanwhile, Tiana was already preparing. The garage had become a workshop of dreams, buzzing with activity. She poured every ounce of her experience, creativity, and determination into preparing her car, a custom-modified vehicle that combined speed, engineering excellence, and innovation. Every weld, every bolt, every adjustment carried her father's legacy. Carson arrived at the garage one evening, unannounced. He didn't know whether to congratulate her or apologize again. I wanted to see the progress, he said, voice hesitant. Tiana didn't look up immediately. You don't get a front row seat, she said sharply. If you're here to admire or interfere, leave. I'm not here for that, he said earnestly. I want to understand. I want to support, if that's okay. Her hands froze over the engine. She turned, studying him carefully. There was sincerity in his eyes, but also hesitation, fear. Support doesn't erase betrayal, she said. It doesn't erase the years my father lost, the nights I spent alone fixing engines, or the trust that was broken. Carson swallowed, the weight of truth pressing on him. I know. I can't undo it. But I want to help you show the world what you're capable of, what your father taught you, what you built. Tiana's gaze softened slightly, but she didn't smile. Then stay out of my way, she warned. I don't need distractions. I need focus. He nodded. I'll do that. The days leading up to Geneva were intense. Tiana worked tirelessly, refining her modifications, running simulations, and testing limits. Carson watched from a distance, increasingly aware of the precision, intelligence, and sheer force of what she possessed. He realized that the humiliation he had inflicted on her, or at least thought he had only made her stronger. Finally, the day of the competition arrived. Geneva's streets were alive with flashing lights, crowds, and cameras. Tiana's vehicle gleamed under the sun, a sleek, blue masterpiece that reflected her skill, her determination, and her father's legacy. She stood next to it, calm, focused, and unstoppable. Carson arrived at the sidelines, feeling out of place amidst the excitement. He knew this was more than a race. This was her proving ground, and a reminder of his own failings. The announcer's voice boomed over the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the International Car Engineering Challenge. Competitors from around the world will showcase skill, innovation, and speed. And here comes Tiana Brooks, the woman who recently made headlines by fixing a billionaire's Ferrari. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras zoomed in on Tiana, capturing her calm confidence. She ignored the attention, stepping into her car with precision, adjusting her seat, checking the engine one last time. The race began. Engines roared. Tires screeched. Tiana maneuvered with unparalleled skill, every turn, every acceleration calculated. She wasn't just driving. She was commanding the machine as if it were an extension of herself. Carson watched, breath held, as the impossible unfolded. Tiana overtook competitors twice her size, drivers with far more resources and prestige. Her engineering modifications gave her the edge. Her strategy, flawless. And then it happened, a sudden obstacle on the track. A competitor's malfunction caused chaos, a potential disaster for the remaining racers. Tiana reacted instantly, controlling her car with precision, avoiding collisions, and helping steer the rival to safety without losing speed. The crowd gasped. Cameras captured every second. She wasn't just winning. She was showing integrity, skill, and leadership. When she crossed the finish line first, the stadium erupted. People cheered, chanted her name, cameras flashed, and social media exploded. Tiana stepped out of the car, her blue Ferrari gleaming, her presence commanding respect. Carson felt a mixture of awe and regret. He realized that no amount of wealth or influence could compete with the authenticity, skill, and courage Tiana displayed. For the first time, he understood the true meaning of legacy. It wasn't built with money. It was built with heart, perseverance, and honor. Tiana turned slightly, her eyes meeting his from across the track. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The look said everything. He had been humbled, and she had risen. And somewhere deep inside, Carson knew that the story wasn't over. This victory wasn't just for Tiana or her father. It was a challenge to him, to become better, to own his mistakes, and perhaps, one day, to earn the right to be trusted again. The applause hadn't even faded when Tiana stepped out of her car, chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. Her hands were still warm from the steering wheel, and the smell of burned rubber lingered around her like a signature of victory. The blue Ferrari gleamed in the sunlight, but she barely noticed it. This one wasn't about the car. It wasn't about proving the billionaire wrong. It was about proving herself, honoring her father, and finally standing tall after years of struggle. Carson Hale stood among the crowd, somewhere near the sidelines. His hands were in his pockets, jaw tight, as he watched her command the stage with a quiet authority that he had never truly experienced before. The billionaire who had once believed he could humiliate her with wealth now understood the real power she possessed, a combination of intelligence, skill, and unshakable courage. He wanted to walk up to her, to apologize, to explain, to beg for a sliver of forgiveness, but Tiana didn't need words from him. She had already done what mattered. She had reclaimed her father's legacy, demonstrated her genius to the world, and, most importantly, asserted her worth on her own terms. After the award ceremony, she was approached by journalists and sponsors alike, all eager to feature her story, her talent, her triumph. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered, but she remained composed, her focus unwavering. Every question reminded her of her journey, from the small garage where she had learned from her father, to the humiliation in Carson Hale's courtyard, to this moment of undeniable victory. Finally, there was a moment of quiet. The crowd had thinned, and Carson stepped forward. Tiana noticed him approaching, her posture stiffening slightly. She wasn't sure what he wanted: recognition, reconciliation, or just closure. "Congratulations," he said simply, his voice low but sincere. There was no arrogance, no smirk, just raw acknowledgement. Tiana studied him. "Thanks," she replied cautiously, unsure if she should say more. He paused, taking a deep breath. I underestimated you. Not just today, but years ago. I didn't see what your father taught you. I didn't see your talent. I only saw what I thought I could control." Tiana's eyes softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "That's the past, Carson. What matters is what you do next." He nodded, a rare humility in his posture. "I want to make amends. Not just for you, but for him, for your father. I want to help others, to recognize talent, to support people like you, so no one ever feels overlooked or humiliated for who they are." She regarded him silently. Part of her wanted to turn away, to leave the past behind without letting him back in. But part of her also saw sincerity, a man finally learning humility the hard way. "Then prove it," she said finally, a quiet challenge in her tone. "Actions matter more than words." Carson smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in years. "I will. I promise." As the sun began to set over Geneva, the blue Ferrari reflected the golden light like a symbol of everything Tiana had fought for. She climbed into the driver's seat one last time, feeling the engine hum beneath her hands, steady, alive, perfect. She started it up, letting the sound carry over the quiet streets, a reminder of her journey and a tribute to her father's teachings. Carson watched, feeling a shift within himself. The lesson was clear: wealth and power meant nothing without respect, courage, and skill. And the woman who had once been the subject of his mockery had become a beacon of inspiration, not just for him, but for everyone watching her rise. In the days that followed, Tiana's story went global. People admired her not only for her technical brilliance, but for her integrity, resilience, and ability to overcome humiliation. Carson Hale, once the arrogant billionaire, began to rebuild his own reputation, this time with transparency, humility, and dedication to supporting others. Eventually, Carson returned to the garage in her hometown, this time not as a billionaire seeking attention, but as a man willing to invest in talent, in people, in justice. Together, they launched initiatives honoring Frank Brooks' legacy, scholarships for young mechanics, workshops in underprivileged areas, and mentorship programs designed to give others the opportunities that had been denied to Tiana and her father. It wasn't easy. The past couldn't be erased. The pain and loss remained. But slowly, mutual respect grew. Tiana had reclaimed what was hers, and Carson had begun the long journey to redemption. One evening, as they stood together in the garage, the sun casting long shadows across the workbenches, Tiana looked at him and said, "You've learned a lot. But remember, respect isn't given. It's earned. Every day." Carson nodded. "I'll remember, and I'll do my best to honor it." She smiled faintly, not for him, but for the journey she had traveled, for the father she had lost, for the woman she had become. The blue Ferrari sat quietly nearby, a symbol of triumph, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of someone who refused to be humiliated, who refused to be forgotten, and who had shown the world that talent and courage are worth more than any fortune. And in that moment, both Tiana and Carson knew their lives had been forever changed, one by pride, the other by perseverance, but together by the undeniable truth that respect, honor, and integrity are the ultimate currency in any world. The story wasn't just about a car. It was about justice, redemption, and the power of standing up for yourself when the world underestimates you. If this story inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that will leave you speechless. Share this video with someone who needs motivation, because everyone deserves a reminder that strength, heart, and determination can change everything.